Welcome to the Wolverine Digest podcast, the best spot for objective and authentic coverage of Michigan athletics. If you want open dialogue, honest opinions, and in-depth coverage of the maize and blue, this is the podcast for you. And now, here's your host, Brandon Brown.
Brandon Brown back in action with the ever-changing panel of homies. We got Dan, who's been a pretty good staple here since we revamped. Eric is back from the Amazon. We'll let him get into that in a minute. And we're joined tonight by Matthew, another familiar face. But Matthew, have you ever done the podcast before? Or have you just done like appearances?
We just an appearance actually. I think I did a brief appearance last year ahead of Michigan State. So I think that was the only live appearance. Yes.
Okay, so for those who don't know, Matthew he's been helping me on various levels for several years now. It was some recruiting stuff back even when I was with the Wolverine. We attended what was that? A camp? It was a camp or something.
It was like a little kids camp though.
We didn't know that. We didn't know that.
Yeah. That in Jackson.
Jackson, that's where. Okay, so there were like 20 Michigan players there. We ended up getting some decent content out of it, but we went to it thinking it was a recruiting camp, and it was like fourth graders. I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. But anyway,
we got to see Jim Harbaugh teaching like blocking technique though, so that was kind of interesting.
That's true. It was an Al Glick, RIP, right? Al Glick.
Yep, that was the one.
Yep. Got a chance to talk to Mr. Glick a little bit that day as well. He was given a gift from the program. Anyway, cool event, and that was the first time I met Matthew. That was several years ago. He's helped me along the way with some football stuff, basketball stuff. You've helped some other people in the industry. We talked about it on our recording. I guess we can let the cat out of the bag a little bit
Absolutely.
now. Matthew actually covered Michigan State. No, we don't need to boo. Matthew is as maize and blue as they come, and it was a bit of a struggle to cover the Spartans. Was it not? I mean, I think you could say that at this point.
That's fair enough. It was. I had to put the heart away and put on the journalism hat, but I did approach it with a professional mindset, and being objective and all that was a priority. That was my top priority, and I think I did a good job for the last 2.5 years.
You covered them this year.
Yeah, up until
the end of April, actually.
Yeah,
that was brutal. If you were covering,
yeah, not exactly a great product to cover, and if you're not a fan of it either, even tougher. But yeah, I didn't really talk about this much either. But as I was creating content and being the publisher of Wolverine Digest, I was also the publisher of Spartan Nation, and that's where I found a spot for Matthew, brought him on board, and you know he ran with it, did a really good job, but ownership has changed hands. Hondo Carpenter, who did it for a lot of years, came back into the fold. So I kind of just gave it back to him. A couple of years ago, he gave it to me. He came back. I gave it back to him. Now Matthew's going to be helping out a lot more here with the Michigan stuff, and I think he's pretty pleased about that. We're hoping for some developmental things, but at least you're back on the right side of the rivalry, I guess.
I'm looking forward to spending some Saturdays in Ann Arbor. I'll just say
there you go. All right. Eric,
will forever be known as the guy who covered Michigan State when Michigan won their national title.
Hey, that's fine.
But
it is what it is.
I was at the national title game with Brandon helping him then, though. So I feel like I got a trump card there a little bit.
That is true. Also at the Rose Bowl, that's where the hat came from. I mean,
Yes,
it was a good little stretch there, obviously. Matthew, why weren't you covering anything that Michigan State was doing?
Because they weren't bowl eligible. So they weren't around. Basketball got off to a slower start for the Spartans than they anticipated too. Not a whole lot going on around New Year's. So I was available to go to California and then down to Houston.
All right, expected and deserved jabs for a little bit here as Matthew gets back in the fold. But Eric, I don't know how much time you need. I mean, we don't want to do the whole hour on your trip, but you are literally within the last couple hours, you just got back home from your 2-week trip abroad. I don't know exactly what you did. We haven't talked a lot. You weren't able to communicate super freely while you were there, but we did shoot some DMs back and forth a little bit. Just in a nutshell, man, if you want to take a minute just to talk about where you just were and what you did. I mean, I'm curious, and I know you were pretty into this trip, and it was something you had been looking forward to for a long time.
Yeah, thank you, man. So I was in the Madre de Dios region of Peru. Just like the U.S. has different states, there's different departments of Peru, and this is the one that borders like Brazil and Bolivia. And when people hear travel, they immediately think vacation, but that was absolutely not what I was doing on this trip, even though it did overlap with my birthday. But honestly, like if I was doing a lot of work on this trip, and if I could be doing work anywhere, doing it in the Amazon was kind of like a dream come true. I was working for Marca Madre de Dios, which, in the best terms that I can explain it, you guys are familiar with Pure Michigan, like that brand, right?
Right. Yep.
So that's a good comparison for it. It's kind of like promotional for the region. Apart from that, I was shooting photography and videography for Corto Maltese, Amazonia, and that's a lodge that's in Puerto Maldonado, which is kind of like the only access point that you have to the jungle from a city in Peru. There's just no cities, so that's the one everyone goes to. After that, I was doing work with the Peruvian international handball team, and I interviewed the
so random. I know when he was telling me what he was doing, I'm like, this is such a specific like thing. I see Dan laughing like, oh, Peruvian handball. Sure.
Yeah, and then
that
I
team,
also
right?
they were impressive. I watched them practice. I also interviewed the chairman or the director of Sports Federation for Madre de Dios, and we're trying to kind of raise the profile and like some awareness for those athletes and what they're doing, because I think obviously handball is not super well known in America, and it looked really fun. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but you throw a ball around.
I've seen it in prisons, I think, on like TV shows or movies. I'm being serious. Like that's the only place I think I've ever seen it.
Yeah, combine like dodgeball with soccer, but you cannot like get very close to the net. If you do, you have to like jump over the line and everything. That's kind of the gist of it.
I think I'm thinking of the one where they hit the ball against the wall. So even there's my ignorance showing through. I have no idea what Eric's talking about at this point. So, all right,
dude,
there you
there
go.
was so much that I learned down there myself. And there are a few things that happen that are like kind of far-fetched, but I've got the proof to back it up. I don't know how much you guys want to get into that, but it was truly mind-blowing. I set my goals and expectations for like what work I'd get done on the trip pretty high, and I was extremely fortunate to exceed those goals. And on this trip, I barely posted any like pictures or videos. One, because the lady who I was working with, Ruth Matakanchai, respectfully, she was working me like a dog. It was like 10 to 12 hour work days every day. We would get up between like 6 and 8 a.m. and we're just hammering through different interviews, which, first of all, they were in Spanish, and my Spanish, it's improving. It's certainly not like fluent on a conversational level. So what that does is it puts a lot of importance on the questions that you prepare. Now, that's perfectly fine, except like our schedule was changing very quickly. So I wouldn't know who we were interviewing until we were on the way to the interview. So
I saw you did post, I think, something. There was like a translator kind of involved. I think you were actually being interviewed in that one.
Yeah, I was at an art gallery in Peru, and then this TV station came through, and they interviewed me for a second, and then had me cut a promo for the TV station, and that was absolutely not on my bingo card for the trip. That was wild.
And by the way, I just want to give Eric his flowers a little bit here, because while he was doing all that, he also managed to find time to like write articles for me and the website, and I'm just like, bro, like, I don't know. He said something was woke up in him, and he's just excited about moving forward and Michigan football and all this and all that. That's just the kind of dude that Eric is. So anyway, I'm sure you could talk a lot more about it. Maybe a slightly different audience for that, but well, anyway, I was curious about how it went and what you did, and glad to have you back. I think you said you were there for like 2 weeks or something, and we didn't have a show for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So it kind of worked out. I know Dan was busy with stuff. Nick was busy with stuff. I was out of town once. My dad's still lost in Minnesota somewhere. So anyway, it wasn't that. And as we all discussed before we got on here, there hasn't been a lot that has happened. So I don't think we're missing a ton. You know, Michigan did get these 4 transfer DBs. I said me and Matthew talked about that and at a pretty good length. I think 15 or 16 minutes we spent talking about that. Wesley Walker from Tennessee, Amir Hall from Albany. Those feel like the 2 dudes that might have the best chance to maybe start or play a lot of snaps. And then Ricky Johnson from UNLV or Washington State. He was committed there, but he never played there. And then Jaden Mangum from Michigan State, who played quite a bit of football for them and looks pretty good, but is kind of just like Makari Page. Like, I just don't know. I doubt him. I doubt he ends up cracking the starting rotation, but another depth guy. And you just wonder, you kind of wonder how these guys are going to fit. So Dan, Eric, I know you guys weren't here for that discussion, but when you hear that Michigan's bringing in 4 DBs who are all 6'1", 6'2", right around 200 pounds, some a little north of that. I think Mangum is the thinnest one at maybe 185 or 190. What do you think? I mean, is this like, are the coaches really worried about their depth? Is the loss of Rod Moore a much bigger deal than even we think? I think it's a big deal, but maybe it's even bigger than we thought. I mean, what do you think when you see 4 DBs that are all pretty similar getting brought in from the transfer portal? Dan, go ahead.
I'm not surprised. So, I mean, I guess I think the word I'm looking for is necessary. I think it was necessary.
Yeah.
It didn't surprise me at all. So, I mean, I wasn't blown away at all by it. So, yeah, they're necessary, needed.
And then Eric, again, I know you were out of the loop a little bit, but the rundown of bringing in these defensive backs, Rod Moore's gone, Keon Sabb is gone, DJ Waller is gone. I mean, those are 3 guys that were probably going to start, and now they're just gone. So, yeah, I mean, is this, you hear necessary, you hear not surprising, you hear depth, you hear quality, whatever you want to talk about. What do you think of when you see 4 guys like that being brought into the same room in a matter of 10 days?
Yeah, I agree with Dan that it was necessary. And what it signals to me is that this Michigan staff is forward thinking, because as the phrase goes, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. And Michigan has already suffered a few injuries that put the Wolverines in this position to begin with. And who's to say that the secondary goes through the entire season without picking up another 1 or 2 injuries? So if that does happen down the line, at least there's a little bit of depth for the coaching staff to juggle when or if that does happen.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things Matthew and I talked about the most. It's just good to have bodies in there. I mean, like I said, 2 of them may start. I mean, there's not like a for sure starter at safety to replace Rod Moore. I mean, there's, Quentin Johnson, Zeke Berry has been talked about. He could maybe be a corner or a nickel. Like, there's some versatility with these guys too. That was one of the things we talked about. Matthew obviously had a front row seat with Jaden Mangum, and he was one of the better players on that defense, but he is a little slimmer than the others. He's very similar to Makari Page, so that almost makes you feel like he's going to be behind him, but maybe not. I mean, let me ask you straight up, Matthew, would it surprise you if Jaden Mangum started at safety opposite Makari Page? Is he that kind of player?
I could see it opposite. I don't see him supplanting Makari. And as we talked about in that recording that you alluded to, they're very similar. Like they both play that free safety spot. I think Rod Moore was more of the strong safety of the 2, and Makari was kind of on the back end, playing center field, and that's what Jaden Mangum brings as well. He's rangy. He's got good length at 6'2". But he hasn't shown to this point an ability to kind of come down and play in the box and be that type of safety. If he's going to develop into that, it's going to be in the weight room with the summer conditioning program coming up in June here. But just his frame and everything, it lends itself more to that free safety spot. And that's what McCarty does. And so I see him kind of as that number 2 behind McCarty.
I will say, I feel like Makari is a pretty physical player. He'll come up and pop a runner. He's not like he doesn't play in the box a lot necessarily, but he will hit you absolutely. I don't know that much about Mangum. Haven't seen him play much. I was going through my phone. I was talking to you while I was doing. I found an old interview when he was a high schooler at Groves, was being recruited. So I had some familiarity with him, not a ton. But he has, is it 2 years of eligibility left still, or 3? 2 or 3, I think.
I believe 2. Yeah, I think he came in. This is 2024, so yeah, I think 22 was his first season. So past the COVID stuff where you have to get, it gets weird. But he played enough both those first 2 seasons to use up. He didn't use a red shirt, so yeah, 2 years left. And I don't want to make it sound like he can't come up and make a tackle. He was. Production wise, he was on the upper echelon of Michigan State's defense. It's just that's not what really stands out with him. What stands out is the sideline to sideline.
The range,
the 5 interceptions last year. A lot of those interceptions came in like kind of a cover 2 or cover 1 situation where he's helping out the corner and kind of undercuts the route and takes one away. So that's kind of where he showed in these last 2 seasons.
There you go. So Wesley Walker from Tennessee, that was SEC, played. He was viewed as an NFL type of prospect. He got injured, and so there's some potential high upside there with him. Amir Hall, the cornerback from Albany, was an FCS All-American, so we're talking one of the best players in the country at that level. And Matthew and I said, look, if he can come in and be Josh Wallace 2.0, like that, there you go. That's your other corner starting opposite Will Johnson, because that spot is up for grabs. And then Ricky Johnson, he does feel a little bit like a depth guy at this point. But again, 4 guys who all have played a decent amount of football, 2 of them at a very high level in the Big Ten and the SEC, and one of them, yes, at the FCS level, but literally one of the best cornerbacks in the country at that level. So I'm interested to see what the secondary looks like. I don't know. The defense has the potential to be really good. Would you say, we'll go around the room on this one, if you're talking front 4, middle, your linebackers, and then secondary, do you think the secondary is the quote-unquote weak link of the defense? I mean, that's kind of misleading because I don't think it's bad, but of the 3 groups, you're talking your front line, your linebackers, and your secondary. Eric, do you think the secondary is the one area like, okay, I'm attacking this Michigan defense, I guess maybe intermediate routes and deep balls is where I'm going because I don't think we got much of a shot anywhere else?
Yeah, gun to head, I absolutely do think that. However, it's a little premature to say that with any authority because we just simply haven't seen any of these guys play together. So
yeah,
it's kind of a question mark what it's going to look like together on the field. And we can speculate which players are even going to be the starting 4 members of that defensive back group, but it's still speculation. So I can't honestly say that I know for sure that it's going to be the secondary, but I'm not going to try to run up the middle on this Michigan defense. And that would lead me to then try to attack through the air.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, you might make the argument that the best player on Michigan's defense is in the secondary in Will Johnson, but is that still the weakest part of the 11?
That's where I was going to go. I think they probably at this point at least are when you see him on the field. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, you don't know, but it's a nice luxury to have to say your weakest link on your defense has one of the top players in the country playing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's literally, slotted to be a top of the first round, top half of the first round kind of guy. So, I mean, if that's your weak link and you got that guy playing there, I mean, that's going to make everyone else better. When you got a guy like that, it makes everyone else better. So look at what they did playing where they played. But then when you get into that, on that field with a guy like Will Johnson, I mean, it forces the defense's hand in ways that you weren't seeing wherever you played last year. So yeah, I think they probably are, and I think that's probably not a bad. That's
what I said. It's a little misleading. Like if it's the worst part of the defense, it still might be pretty damn good.
Yeah, worst part of one of the best defenses in the country.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean that like I said, that goes back to Harbaugh's old thing. I don't like to compare because you're diminishing somebody, and that's kind of what that is. But CJ says it exactly the way we just did right there. Sounds weird to call a unit with the best corner in the country a weak spot, but it might be on that defense. It might be. And Matthew, do you say, okay, we have one side pretty well figured out. I know safeties move all over the place and corners travel a little bit too, but if you've got Will Johnson out there and Makari Page on that, I mean, that half's pretty much off limits. I mean, just about. I mean, I don't know if people would say Makari's an elite cover safety, but he's pretty damn good. He's very long, he's very rangy, and he's played a lot of football. Is that, okay, let's just try to figure out the other half and know that we've only got 50% of the field to worry about at this point?
Yeah, that's, I mean, the way you describe it there, it does sound it's pretty promising to have those 2 guys on the same side of the field. I think you're going to see, especially early in the season, Texas comes into Ann Arbor week two. They've got a ton of weapons. They've got an experienced quarterback. Wouldn't be surprised if they're testing the other side of the field and just kind of leaving Will Johnson alone because, maybe you don't need to even tempt fate a little bit there. So, yeah, I think the secondary's probably got some question marks. It's certainly not the defensive line. The defensive line is stacked. Probably, I mean, you can make an argument it's the best defensive line in the country between Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Rashawn Benny. He got hurt, I think, in the Rose Bowl, but coming off of that injury. And then edge guys like Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart coming back from a year ago.
That's such a good group, man.
That's an excellent front 4 right there. And then there's some question marks at linebacker, but not so much from a talent standpoint, more so from maybe a reps standpoint, because you lose Junior Colson.
Experience.
Yeah, you lose Junior Colson, you lose Mike Barrett, but Ernest Hausman, the transfer from Maryland, who's his name is escaping me at the moment, but
Jayshawn Barham, who's
there you go.
He might end up being the best one on the team, honestly, from what everybody says and has seen.
Right. So not so much, but reps within Michigan's system a little bit linebacker. So something to watch, but certainly not lacking in talent. But yeah, if there's a couple holes, it's probably on that other side of the field at those strong safety and number 2 corner spots.
Yep. I think to CJ's point, and I've said this before, it feels like what he said defensive line depth might be a weak. I think it's just depth, period. Like the starting 11 is awesome, just about awesome. I mean, you could safety, maybe the other corner, but the other 9 are like locked. They're locked in. Like you have 9, no doubt, day one, every down kind of players. And then behind them, though, it's a little thin. This team is not as deep as it has been over the last couple of years. That's why they were able to weather all the storms and and win it all. I mean, they were good and deep and experienced and across the board, especially on defense. And you don't really have that this year. Yeah, you named 4 or 5 guys, but you do have Rayshawn Benny coming off an injury, and he wasn't like an every single down player last year, but he was coming on. You would expect him to take a step and be pretty good this year. But the starters just about everywhere are awesome, and you just wonder what young guys are going to step up, how much can they contribute, who starts at safety and corner. That's where, again, these 4 transfer DBs really could come into play. But it should be a really good unit at all 3 levels. I mean, Kenneth Grant, Mason Grant, that's the best defensive tackle duo in the country. They're both billed as first-round picks right now. So that you can cover up a lot of mistakes with 2 dudes like that, and then you've got 2 athletic linebackers. You've got Will Johnson taking away the top receiver. You've got Makari. You've got some really good pieces in some good places. I want to throw I am going to put up a lot of comments if you guys got them. We were talking about this before we started. There's not a lot that's happened that we have to cover. So anybody watching, 400 people watching us Yahoos right now, by the way. Anybody who wants to throw a question or a comment out there, please do it. I will do my best to get to it, and we'll talk about it and break it down. But yeah, Jair Hill's a name. That's a guy who made some plays in the spring game, was a pretty highly touted recruit. It's one of the guys that maybe he ends up starting at corner opposite Will Johnson. You never know. But this is, again, why they brought some other guys in. They're looking for some answers in that secondary, and I think that's the one area that if I had to call it weak, that's probably where I would go. But that's kind of a slap in the face that doesn't need to happen because it's going to be a pretty good unit, I think. Let's go with another question from Tim, something I hadn't really thought about. And honestly, I don't know if it's going to work. There's so many things that are going to change with schools now being able to pay players directly. Like, do you get into contract situations? Do you get into, well, if we're going to pay you this amount of money, then scholarships are gone and we'll just get rid of you. I mean, you're basically an employee at this point. So he's asking, with the new NIL cap, and I think, Matthew, didn't use it 20 million? Is that I
thought that's what I heard. Yeah, 20 million per school.
20 million per school.
I think that's for like the whole athletic department,
right?
Though. I don't think that's specifically for football.
For other schools, I would think Michigan, like most of the big football schools, are going to dump a ton into football because it powers the entire athletic department, and that's only fair. And that's also what puts butts in the seats. It's essentially the driving force of the entire university, if we're being honest with ourselves, at most of the big places. So do we think that players will be cut if they're not performing? In the past, kids were on scholarship. That's a little bit of a loose phrase right there. You have to keep them because they're on scholarship. No, you don't. Lots of kids have been pushed out of their scholarship situations at lots of schools, including at Michigan. But this is something I hadn't really thought of. Matthew, you've covered it at Michigan State. You've obviously been pretty plugged in with Michigan. It's going to be different at every school. Different schools are going to give money in different ways. The Indianas of the world, they've got a lot more to worry about with basketball than you do at a place like Michigan, I would say. I mean, Indiana, they're known for their basketball program. You wonder what that's going to look like. But overall, regardless of sport, are there going to be players that have to live up to their expectations, or they're going to, like, I hadn't even thought about this, to be honest. I really hadn't thought about the fact of a guy essentially being cut or fired or whatever word you want to use if they're not doing their job.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because I hadn't thought about this, specific situation much either. But I do think we're going to get to a point where uh, when a kid signs his letter of intent, that's a de facto contract. And so I think just like an NFL program can cut a guy, yes, but you still have to pay him a minimum of what he was owed. So I think there's going to be language like that in these
Cap
contracts,
hits and dead money and all that. Yeah,
all
that
that kind of stuff. I think it's coming to college athletics, and so if one thing we've learned over the last couple of years, as players have gotten more power with their ability to transfer whenever, with their ability to earn name, image, and likeness deals and things like that. And let's be honest, a lot of it's pay for play. That's just the reality of it. There's going to be some things in these contracts that's going to protect players too, and there probably should be if we're being honest. So
yeah.
I think that there's probably, like I said, there's going to be something to protect against maybe just cutting. Oh, you dropped that ball for the third game in a row. I guess you're no longer on the team. Like, I don't think that's exactly what's going to happen. The thing I'm interested in seeing is when this revenue sharing becomes part of college athletics, and we do get these contracts for players, is that going to help stem the tide of the transfer portal a little bit? And I think the way to do that is to incentivize. If you play one season at Michigan or one of these other schools, you get X amount of dollars. If you come back for your next season, you're going to get a boost, and that continues throughout your 4 years. I think that's one of the ways you can kind of maybe put a limit on some of these, because the transfer portal is insane right now, and this is not sustainable. So we have to find a way to incentivize players sticking it out with their schools and kind of going through the growing pains and working your way into a role. You're still going to have some transfers. That's fine. It might be the right decision for some kids, but the fact that there's thousands in the portal, that's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
Would
Dan,
you call that a loyalty bonus?
yeah, something. Dan, I was gonna say, you're a business guy. You can people who aren't performing, right? That's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. And that's kind of where college athletics has been going with NIL and transfer portal and all this stuff, is a version of professional sports, and that's what we're moving towards. And this is a step in that direction. And I think
it gets reported in a different way, but we've all known like what it is. Like, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
But I think just like everything else we've seen with NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff, I mean, it seems like they've done all this stuff not knowing any of these questions. And they're just let's just throw this out there and see, throw this in the water and see where the ripples go, and then we'll sort it out from there. And this is kind of one of those, we're sorting this out or that out. And I mean, I think they've already used the transfer portal to push people out. If you're not performing, we're just going to go get 4 guys at your position, and you're going to go, oh, I don't have a spot, I'm leaving. They're already using that to just push scholarship people around. Yeah. So it'll be another way. That we're making this, like you said, more like a business, more like a professional sport, and it probably takes a long time to sort itself out. I mean, NIL still hasn't, and
right.
We're just right in the middle of sorting all this stuff out. And we're 3 years in, 4 years in. I don't even know where we're at.
All of this stuff is like in its infancy, but it's just happening at the same time. It's like, can we do one at a time? Can we figure one out before we? Yeah. But it's it's intertwined. It's related. The money thing.
It's so layered. Like every one of these affect the other, and like just throwing one thing in affects the other ones that are already in play. And I mean, you just kind of like, we got to wait and see.
Yeah. I mean,
and teams will push it. Teams will push it beyond, or, schools will push it beyond what its intent is, and they'll find out what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed. And I mean, it probably takes 10 years to sort out. We're not there with the original stuff.
I know. I don't know what the percentage would be, but I'd have to say it's 3/4 of the players that go to the transfer portal are because they're not playing because they're not good enough. I mean, like, that's what it's been. There's other stuff. I mean, kids get homesick and they really do want to be closer to their family, and maybe there's a coaching change at their position. I mean, there are other things, but like the large majority is because they're not playing, and they're not playing because there's people there better. Like, that's just what it is. So to Tim's point, I don't really know if it's that different. It just, now it's going to be a little bit more out in the open. That's another thing that keeps happening. More of the stuff that was done behind closed doors can now be discussed publicly by the players and the university. That was never the case before. It was all off limits and tongue in cheek, and you couldn't say this, you couldn't say that. Now you kind of can. I don't know if it changes that much, really, Eric. I mean, when you're talking about the amount of money that these schools can throw around, if it's a $20 million cap for the entire athletic department, and Michigan's going to put X amount towards football, and that might end up being
19.5.
Yeah, it might be, dude. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I would guess it's a huge majority for football at most of the places that care about football. Like, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if Auburn was like 20 million, all of it football. Let's go. Like, more damn Eagle. Like, like some of them are just going to do that. It feels like, I don't know. At that point, then it becomes kind of like an arms race. Like, oh, Bama did 19.4. We're going to do 19.41, or like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what that really means. And then that becomes the next bargaining chip for a recruiting pitch. It's just like, dude, when does it stop? Why would you go there? They're only doing 18.5. We're doing 19.2, baby. Come on over to Ann Arbor or whatever it is. So, Eric, I guess what Dan just said, what we've all been seeing for the last 3 to 4 years, this is just another ripple, another massive change that's going to change the landscape of college football. At the end of the day, is it still going to feel like college football on the field? Or is all this other stuff just getting too wild?
I think we're inching closer and closer to it becoming NFL Junior. And I'm glad that you mentioned how much money is going to be allocated to what sport, because I was trying to answer that question while you guys were talking. And let's consider if each player is paid the same amount, and I know that probably won't happen exactly, but $100,000 per player for 1 year is a very good living for a job in general,
Sure.
Right? Now, if you multiply that by 85, that brings you to $8.5 million for football per season. And I don't know, even though $8.5 million is a lot, I don't know if that's enough, $100,000 a year for a lot of these players. And let's say that you have a kid who there weren't a ton of expectations for him before the season began, who ends up dominating midway through. Can he try to use that leverage for a raise in the middle?
Now you're talking holdouts, mid-season holdouts. Like,
yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah,
it's the NFL. That's what it looks like.
NFL, man.
Yeah, that's what it looks
it.
like. It's so. I mean, that's a great point, and it could go the other way. And you have a third string guard who doesn't even play, and he's sitting back, getting fat and happy and making the same amount as your starting quarterback. Like it. I think you're right, Eric. I don't think it's probably not an even distribution. I think to Matthew's point, you come back another year, there's a loyalty bonus, there's a playing time bonus, there's a production bonus. Dude, it just gets to be it gets to be the NFL. That's what it is. Like there's contract bonuses, you get this many yards, you get this many touchdowns, you play X amount of snaps. Like all that stuff is in the NFL. There's already a model. It's pretty successful, by the way, too, if you guys haven't noticed. Pro football, pretty big. That's what it all comes down to, is who's going to make more money and get more to line everybody's pockets. So they're just going to keep moving towards that. That's what it feels like.
So we talk about these contracts in college sports as if they're a bad thing. And I'm not saying that they are or they're not. But in the NFL, this is obviously a reality that we've had to deal with as fans forever. And do the contracts, honestly, answer this if you guys could. Do the contracts and the holdouts and all that stuff, does that get in your way of enjoying the NFL or not at all?
Not really. Once in a while, some guy will be a complete dink, and I'm like, I don't like that guy. But for the most part, the product as a whole, and I'm a pretty big NFL guy. I know Matthew pretty big in the NFL.
I'm actually not so much into the NFL, to be honest. I'm more of a college athletics guy. Like I have, I root for the Dolphins and then I root for the Lions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know you're not a Lions guy, but
explains right there why I'm not huge into the NFL. This last year, notwithstanding, because the Lions had an excellent season, but for the first 20 to 25 years of my life, both of my teams were not very good. So like I don't have a great rapport with the NFL. I prefer college athletics. That's my biggest fear, actually, is that college football becomes the farm, just like the farm system for the NFL. Minor league NFL. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea. But with the Big Ten and the SEC emerging as kind of the NFC, AFC equivalents, I'm worried that's where we're headed. I'm a traditionalist, though. I don't want it to be that way. I'd like there to be more than just 35 teams who compete for the national championship every year. Granted, like I understand, like I'm not so dense that I don't understand that typically most years there's 8 teams, maybe 8 teams that can win a national championship. I get that. But yeah, we're not that far removed from a conference championship actually meaning something, though. Like a Big 12 championship, a Pac-12 championship used to mean something. The Big Ten was like the Midwest, region, like that. There was a sense of pride of winning your area, and we're drifting away from that, and I don't like that part of it. But I'm not ready to give up college sports at this time. I'm just saying that's my fear as it becomes NFL like.
Yeah.
So you're still
a purist.
Say that again. You cut out.
You're still a purist. I think that's what Eric said.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a purist and a traditionalist when it comes to college athletics for sure.
So I am too, and I want to throw Tim's other comment up real quick because he's asking a question. That's correct. So this is 20. NIL still is running rampant. They can do whatever the hell they want. NIL. This 20 million is just from the school itself. It has nothing to do with NIL. It shouldn't change or affect anything with NIL as far as I know.
I do believe schools will be able to help
foster deals.
Yeah, foster deals, because the
be
whole
more
farce
involved
of the thing was like the collectives were not supposed to be affiliated with the schools, or that was never a reality. Like they were always like connections between the collectives and the schools. Now it's just kind of more out in the open. The hilarious thing was like the NCAA didn't do anything about enforcing its own rules anyway, so it didn't matter. So you might as well make it the new litigation that to bring the collectives into the university. But no, a lot of it's unknown, so we're kind of discovering it as we go here.
And Valiant just signed a deal. So Michigan is appearing, and this is what I've always said and what I've always hoped, like Michigan could be the best in the country with NIL, honestly, like because of their brand power, their academic power, their athletic power, not just in football either. I mean, across the board, they're, the Champions Cup, whatever the hell that, nobody cares. But like Michigan's really good at everything. That's like the best way. They're really good at everything. They're widely recognized. They have one of the largest endowments in the world, the biggest alumni network, all this money everywhere, billionaire investors littered all over the world. They could really run the show. I mean, in a way that most schools cannot. So that's what a lot of people have just been waiting for, was for Michigan to do it better on a bigger level and be more efficient with it. I think that's coming, but also I'm with Matthew. I like, how things were. I feel like things are changing way too much and way too fast. I was never against athletes getting paid to be who they are. That part always seemed crazy. Now that you're allowing the schools to pay them, and it's gone too far past the line, in my opinion. I think it's just the problem with it was that the numbers got so big and the schools and everybody was making so much money with the TV deals and the kids weren't getting any of that things just had to change. But I always thought it was stupid. Like, why the hell can't Blake Corum sell a pair of his shoes? If you like, that's dumb. Like, what? Like, why can't he do that? That has nothing to do with him playing football for Michigan. Like this, he's who he is. It just went way past that, and now you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, and it's just out of control. And I don't know what you do about that. Eric is commenting on the page with us. That's interesting. Even though schools could spend $20 million on athletics now, will certain schools still push the envelope? And there it is. It's been that way for a billion years, and it's going to continue to be that way. So yeah, now you're going to have $20 million on the books and another $8 million under the table that go. Yeah. I mean, it's
harder to track, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because now there is a paper trail that they want you to find.
You see the kid riding around campus in a freaking Escalade, and
it was like, hey, how do you do that? Now they can say, well, how do you think he did it? We gave him the money.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's as soon as NIL became a thing, you started, and like Matthew said, schools weren't supposed to be involved, but they absolutely were. Like, they'd have meetings with these businessmen. These businessmen would go out and be like, that's the quarterback that I'm going to give $500,000 to. And you're like, well, what if the staff doesn't want that guy?
Exactly.
Well, they do. Well, how do you know? How do you know? You know, it became a joke immediately. I mean, I'll never forget. There was that dude down in Miami who owned like 1,000 gyms all over the world, and he was just shucking money out to every random kid that was on Miami's recruiting board. And I'm like, everyone's like, how the hell do you know which kid? Like, how do you think he knows? He probably was in Cristobal's office drinking champagne with making a list, dude. Like, what do you mean? How does he know? Like, yeah, it just became a thing where every time there's a line, schools are going to step past it. Then the line moves a little more, and then they move past it again. And it just seems to be like very out of control now at this point. Yeah, this was another concern, the whole like walk-on approach. Like you can give money now. Like there are no more walk-ons. It would seem to be. I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like. And, you know, walk-ons they've never been a huge part of the on-field necessarily, but they're a huge part of the program, the behind the scenes. And every once in a while you do get a kid that really steps up that used to be a walk-on. So I don't know, man.
I think you'll still get some kids though who like a staff member or a recruiting, staff member will approach guy, hey, we can't give you a scholarship, or we can't give you one of these contracts, but we really like your game and we think you can develop. And I think there'll still be some of that. It'd probably look a little differently now. There probably won't be like, oh, we're not going to give you anything, because you can probably go somewhere else and get something from somebody. But I do think there'll be a little bit of that. It's going to change the way it looks though a little bit.
Yeah, it's the changes. I mean, Dan, I think, has this. Dan's the oldest in here by just a couple months. I got 40 coming. You just hit it, right, Dan? In April, I believe.
April, yep.
Eric, I think, is the youngest. Not 30 yet, right, Eric?
31.
31. Matthew?
I'll be 32 in 17 days.
So Eric is now the youngest in here at 31, and we're all like, well, Eric maybe not quite as badly, but Matthew is certainly yelling at the clouds. Old guy out on his lawn.
Yeah.
I mean, he's all in. I'm not sure, Eric, where you fall on the being an old guy and just wanting college football to stay put. I certainly don't like most of the changes. Dan, I know you're old school too. I'm sure you're in the same boat. I don't know. Is it ever, Dan, I'll go to you first as the elder statesman. Is it ever going to be enough to be like, I can't do this, dude. It's just not even what I used to love.
It's hard for me to imagine that, but
I know.
I've seen myself like rid myself of other things, other sports. Like I barely watch college basketball anymore if it's not Michigan. Yeah. Like I don't even watch March Badges. I just don't. There's no time. So some of it is like life goes on. You don't have as much time. You don't have.
You get older. Things start to shift in your priorities for sure.
It is really hard for me to imagine college football being in that boat. But I mean, I would never say never.
Yeah,
it's wild. It's definitely wild.
I mean, so
coming off Michigan winning a national champion. I mean, it's really hard to imagine right now.
At least there's that. I mean, if this is the last like good season, then so be it.
Yeah.
But I keep thinking about it with even the new football game coming out. Dan, I think you said you have a system, but you don't really play it. You're not. I don't know. You're not a video game guy, really.
I'll be getting it. No, I'll be.
But you'll be into that because it's college football. That's my point. Like even that game is going to be weird in some ways already, and then it's going to be weirder every year that they release it. It's going to be like, man, dude, I don't even want to do this crap. Can I just go back? Can we go back to when things were real? But no, that game's like 40 some days from coming out, and I'm excited about it. But yeah, every other day there's like a new release of information about like what's going to be in the game and what's not. And transfer portal was like a tiny little blip on this game. Like you would get a kid or you would like lose a kid. That was it. Now, if it's not like a front and center part of the game, it's going to be like you're missing a massive part of what makes college football now. And it's just going to keep shifting from that to NIL deals to this 20 million.
Does it have any NIL in the game? Do you know?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I don't feel like I've seen much mention of NIL in the little info releases. No. And maybe that's where, so far,
you gotta save something
for
your
schools. It's not the schools, but if this new $20 million thing goes into place in 2025, that's got to be in there. And it's wild to think about that. It's wild. There is a transfer.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say there is a transfer portal. There was one in the old game. There definitely is in the new one. How involved it is, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's a lot, man. I feel like I'm aging quickly when it comes to the college football world anyway.
Yeah.
I thought
Matthew,
I saw
what were you
something on
gonna say?
Twitter about, and this could have been fake, but there's been some things that have kind of leaked about the game and things like
Mhm.
that. But I thought in like one of like the creative player, like you can create your own guy and kind of go through college, and then that guy can go onto Madden or whatever. I thought like part of like the whole promo for that, or like a leaked promo, was like about staying loyal, or will you jump ship and go to the next. Like that was like almost in like the promo too. So like
Yeah.
that's just part of the world now. And it'll be realistic. It'll be unrealistic if it's not in the game. So
Well, I
that'll be interesting.
saw a couple interesting things with that. So Road to Glory, if you guys remember
was
on
the
this
one, yeah.
this game, Road to Glory, you would create a prospect and you'd take him through his senior year of high school. They got rid of that altogether. Now you just start out as a 3, 4, or 5-star prospect and you choose your path based on that. So they've already altered that a little bit. I'm not sure if it's because of how that's all gone, where you've got high school kids now like making deals. Like I'll go. Remember there was I don't remember who the kid was, but he was like, I need 3,000 just to come on a visit. That was like a thing. It was only around for like a couple weeks. I think he quickly realized like, yeah, that shit probably is not going to work really. Like I can't quite make a demand like that as a high schooler, but who knows, man? I mean, you get somebody like the LeBron of football, they might be able to say, I'm not even setting foot on your school's campus unless you give me 10 grand. Like
I think
that
was
may be
more
a
of that
thing.
going on than
It's
than
going
you
on.
realize.
It's
It
definitely
probably is.
That
No, it probably is.
That's going on.
So they changed that a little bit. No more starting out in high school for whatever reason. That was always a pretty fun part of the game, in my opinion, but that's gone. And now I just saw today that, which I'm not really sure why, but Arch Manning is I think he might be like the biggest name that didn't opt into the game. So he's not on the game. All these players had to give their consent to be in the game. It's going to be real rosters and real players. That's why Donna was on the cover, all that good stuff. Arch Manning decided not to opt in. And I saw somebody was like, well, just create him. There's actually something built into the game where you cannot create Arch Manning. Like it will not let you do it. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like
you just spell the name different.
You could. I'm sure there might be if there's a workaround, somebody will find it.
One letter different. You just got to change your spelling.
Dude, what about that poor kid in Nevada whose name happens to be Arch Manning and he wants to be in the game? Poor kid can't even create himself. That's horseshit.
Yeah.
But no, it's just March Anning. Switch the letters backwards and forwards, but I don't know. I mean, it's just more symbols of all this stuff just changing so fast for the worst. I'll say it, damn it. It's for the worst. I don't like it. I'll stand out and yell at the clouds. I want the players to get paid, but they should do it on their own. I feel like that's how it should be. Then if you're good enough, you go to the pros, then you can make your contracts and your demands and all this good stuff. But it's hard though when the schools and some people are making billions on TV deals. It's a hard thing to say, like, you don't get any of that money. You can just go get your own money. I don't know, man.
I think revenue sharing is a good thing for
to some degree.
That makes sense. Like these TV executives are getting more money than they know what to do with, and they're not doing anything except sitting behind a desk and making decisions that are ruining college athletics. And so anything that takes a little bit of their cut and gives it to the players, I'm all on board with. I just wish that we could figure out a way to do it better that doesn't destroy what college athletics was
back
for
in time and do it
80
over.
years. Yeah. Time travel. Yeah.
Try to do it again. Go back
and just make it a straight revenue sharing, equal across the board, like so that they're not getting, obviously they were being used for all these other people to make money. Okay, now you're making money, but it's not, you get this or you get that, or I'll leave here for more. And you cut all that out of it and you still kind of keep it. That was we didn't even really get into this. Said, Brandon, there's no putting that toothpaste back.
No, hell no, man. I think Matthew, you might have mentioned it very briefly, or maybe it was Eric. Somebody did that. Michigan is a tier 1 school, so there's also like levels to the level. It's like not like based on how well it's always one of those things like chicken or the egg. Like now the better schools are going to get more when it's like, well, it's kind of backwards. Like now they're just going to get better. The gap's going to get wider. We're moving towards the 2 big conferences. It's all there. The writing
Except
is on
in
the walls.
NFL, the best team picks last in the draft.
That's what I mean.
That's not how it works in college recruiting.
That's what I mean. The tier 1 best schools get the biggest allotment. That doesn't seem right, but but they are the ones that make the most money too. So on that front, it does make sense. Like, you have to do it that way. You can't give schools more than they're even worth. Like that, I don't know, man. I'm glad I'm not the one making the decisions, because it hurts my head just talking about it. And all I have to do is come up with an opinion. I don't have to solve any problems. And clearly they're not being solved anyway. So I don't know if anybody's solving any problems. So I don't know. All right, we're 50 minutes in. If anybody else has a question, please throw it up there. We got a lot of people watching, not a lot of people commenting. That's all right. Zach B, I believe that would be Zach Besaw, ducking us again. I told him I'd send him an invite. He shot us down once again. He just launched a new career in World of Warcraft. Let's all shame him and make fun of him for that. And we'll move on accordingly. So
Zach did, which I met Zach in Indianapolis last year when we were covering Big Ten Media Days. He did throw in a little jab at me there in the comment section too.
Did
I
he?
appreciate that. Yeah, a little Michigan State jab from old Zach. So
what's the MSU guy doing on here? There you go. Fair enough. But yeah, so as we kind of move into the dog days of the summer, the Michigan team will be, working out together without the coaches. What that actually looks like right now is interesting because of the quarterback situation, because of the wide receiver room not super experienced. So if you guys really sat back and thought about how this summer would look for the team, with Alex Orji, with Jack Tuttle, with Davis Warren, with all these quarterbacks that are seemingly battling for the job. I mean, I think we all really like the idea of Alex Orji being the guy, but I don't know if we can say that right now. What do you think needs to be happening this summer with the players, coaches not involved? Eric, so like if you're driving by campus, you see the practice field out there, what do you want to see? What needs to be worked on the most by the Michigan players without their coaches' involvement? I mean, everybody needs to lift and get faster and get stronger. We know that. But what are some things that you think need to absolutely happen amongst the players within the roster this summer as they're starting their workout stuff in June and July?
Okay, so I'm not sure I have such a great answer for this, but if we're talking about like what it's going to look like, not just routes on air. I want to see players going against each other. I want to see a lot of one-on-one reps. And the more and more they do that, the better the chemistry is going to be. But it's not just, okay, we need to get the timing down on this play or that play. It's how the guys work like together as people and the amount of like commitment they have to each other. Because while I was waiting in the airports during a layover, I watched a 30-minute video that kind of recapped Michigan's season last year. And what was so apparent is how much those kids cared for each other. And particularly when Zach Zinter went down, they fought for each other. Blake Corum ran for a rushing touchdown on the very next play. And when he got to the camera, he held up Zach Zinter's number as like an homage to his fallen player. And that kind of brotherhood and commitment to each other, that is what can separate a team from a good team to a really, really, really good team. And that's what I want to see.
What, dude, such an incredible moment, by the way. That was just so badass when, I mean, it's Ohio State. It's the dude, it did. I didn't want to be like, Eric, you just gave me chills, but like, I swear I felt like a little wave. Like I remember being in the stadium and how that felt. And for Blake to think of that, like almost on the spot, like to throw up Zach's number. Yeah, dude, that was incredible. Dan, I'll go to you next. Switch up the question a little bit. Okay, it's May 29th, man. We're not even to June. The workout stuff hasn't even really started yet. Is it going to be Orji? Can we just say that? I mean, is that what you feel in your gut when you look at this roster and what the team might look like?
It is. It is. I think if it's not, I think you're falling back to somebody else. Like, I think it's, you went through the summer and you went through fall camp and all that stuff, and he just wasn't it. Like, I think it's his job. You can't say that. None of the coaches would say that, but you just get that feeling around the team like it's his job just based on the way they want to play and how much of a freak athlete he is and how many problems that could pose. And like we don't have any reason to believe we're gonna have anything scary in the pass game, no matter who's in there.
Yeah.
So like if it's not him, you just feel like it's like, oh, he must have really struggled. He must have really, No, I think yes. I think it's him. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be him.
You know why else I feel pretty good about saying that? Because he's still here. He's still here. Like he's got enough ability that if it wasn't him and he knew it wasn't him, or if he knew he really like, damn, I really might not be the starter. Like there's a good chance Jack Tuttle beats me out, or there's a good chance, Davis Warren just wins over the team and just moves the offense. He'd leave. He would leave. Like he's too good of an athlete to just watch.
Yeah, and you probably don't say that about any of the rest of them.
I agree.
You know,
all the rest of them are like, well, I'll be a backup. I'll be here at Michigan. I'll do this. I'll do that.
Or they're younger and they're like,
Jack Tuttle's
whatever. Like, I'm a freshman. Like, it's good. He'll be the guy, and then I'll work my way in.
Sure.
But the older guys are like, this is kind of what I am.
Yeah, Jack Tuttle's already transferred.
No matter where I go, this is probably what I am.
He didn't run away with the job and light it up at Indiana. So like, what else you gonna do, man? Stay at Michigan and play some ball, and maybe you play 4 games. Knock on wood, if somebody gets hurt or something. You never know. I mean, like I'm with you. Matthew, to close this out, you were the one who wanted to talk about the schedule. I don't know if we need to go game by game, but Michigan, I think when you look, and I've done this every year I've ever been a fan, and certainly since I started covering the team for a living, you look at Michigan's schedule every year and you circle the games, and most years, it's like Michigan season is 3 games this year. It's 3. This year, it's 5. There are 5 losable games on their schedule. I mean, I'm not saying they're the favorite, the most likely to outcome is a loss, but I think there are 5 games they can lose, which is usually just flat out not the case. Now, we all have seen Michigan lose 5 games before, and it shouldn't happen, but it has. What is Michigan and Eric and Dan and Nick and my dad? We've all done. This is your first time being on here, kind of talking about this. We did a little bit of a, season projection, or what's a good year for Sharon Moore in year 1. So, but you haven't been here, so I'll ask you that. What is a good year for Sharon Moore in year 1? What are the expectations? What does he need to do? I mean, if you've got a record, throw it out there. We'll certainly hold you to it here on May 29th.
Absolutely,
for sure.
But if you want to, go that route. What does Michigan football look like in 2024?
Yeah, so I'll come back to that, but real quickly, I just wanted to give a couple thoughts on the other questions you asked to Eric and Dan. Specifically, Eric, asking him about what do you want to see from like the strength and conditioning program. I want to see Justin Tress do everything that Ben Herbert did. Like that's what I would love to see. Like that's an easy answer, but just like losing Ben Herbert, it still hurts me a little bit to see him walk out the door. So, but if Justin Tress can come in and be that guy or the equivalent of that, then Michigan's going to be okay. The quarterback thing, I agree with you. I think it's Alex Orji's job to lose at this point. Going back now to your question for me with the schedule. So your question what is a good season for Sharon Moore in year 1?
Sure. That's one way you could put it. I mean, like, there's varying degrees of that, but he's not in the easiest position in the world in terms of the results he needs to get this season.
This is kind of funny because in the first portion of Jim Harbaugh's tenure, before the breakthrough, before the wins over Ohio State, before the Big Ten championships, Jim Harbaugh won 10 games a lot, and yet people were getting tired of 10 wins. I think if Sharon Moore and this Michigan team win 10 games this year, you run with that. That would be a very good outcome for Michigan this season. If one of those 10 wins is over Ohio State, like icing on the cake, like that's maybe you drop the game to Texas, maybe you drop the game to Oregon, but if you beat Ohio State in Columbus again for the second straight time, trip over there, you win 10 games, you're a playoff team. You've got a decent shot of getting to the Big Ten championship game because Texas would be a non-conference loss. And so you've only got one loss in conference play. Maybe it's a rematch against Oregon. So 10 wins, I think, would be outstanding for Sharon in year one. More realistically, right now, not to tip my hand a little bit here, but I do think 9-3 at this point is a little bit more realistic. And I don't know, that Texas game is really intriguing to me because it's early in the year.
Mm-hmm.
Texas has got to come into Ann Arbor. So that one I'm intrigued about and really looking forward to being there for sure. I think that game will kind of signify a little bit like what the season could look like for Michigan. Because like, make no mistake, Texas was a playoff team last year when there were only 4 teams got in. They bring a lot of that team back. They're replacing some wide receivers, but it's Sark, and he's gonna have plenty of talent at wide receiver. So I think that 9-3, 10-2 area is what this season kind of projects for me right now. The fact that you get USC at home, I lean, like, again, this is May 29th, so we'll make our predictions once the season, like, we're get to that week. But I think I lean Michigan right now against USC. I think the physicality that Michigan plays with, USC has not been able to match that kind of physicality, even in the Pac-12, which was better last year, but doesn't have the physicality of the Big Ten. So that one, I like Michigan's chances. Washington's not what they were last year. I mean, you're talking, I think 20 out of 22 starters, maybe 21 out of 22 starters from last year's team gone. So they're not the same. Now, you do have to go to Seattle.
It's in Seattle.
Yeah. You throw in the West Coast thing, and even in the NFL, that's a big deal. Teams that are in the East Coast having to go play like San Fran or something like that. It's tough. So, but yeah, 9 wins, 10 wins. I think you feel pretty good about that in year one for Sharon. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
So you've got those 5 games. You mentioned 3 or 4 of them right there. I think Texas, September 7th. That one's tough, man. You mentioned it. Sark back, the weapons, Ewers is back there. I mean, it's not that different of the team they made it to the playoff with last year. Like, Michigan lost a ton, Washington lost a ton, Bama's going to be really good again. Milroe is back, but they're not on the schedule. Texas, Washington, both on the schedule, but in very different positions. USC without Caleb Williams. I mean, I think Michigan should win that game. It's at home.
I agree.
They give up 1 billion points. They don't have this, all-world quarterback. That feels like a win to me. At Washington, I think Michigan's better on paper, but yeah, the Seattle thing, that's tricky. That's not easy, and Michigan has never fared well going out west. Like, that's a recorded thing in the history of the program. Mm-hmm. That's October 5th, by the way. Oregon at home, they're going to be pretty darn good. They got the transfer quarterback. His name is Dylan Gabriel, who's bounced around a little bit, but he's a playmaker. He's played a ton of big time football, won a lot of games, and they've got weapons, and they did a lot in the transfer portal. They were one of the other schools that brought in a lot of stuff from the transfer portal. And then you go to Columbus, and again, on paper, they look like a machine. I mean, for the last handful of years, people think like, oh, they're so good. And then Michigan beats them. It feels a little different to me this year. Again, it's May, and we'll know by the time November 30th rolls around. We'll have a very good feel for the two teams. But, yeah, that's the 5-game season right there. Texas, USC, at Washington, Oregon, and at Ohio State. All pretty spaced out. You've got 2 in September, 1 in October, 2 in November. Health. There's so many things that play a factor.
Does Michigan play Nebraska this season?
I don't think so. I just saw D put that up there. I was looking at the schedule.
Because if they are on the schedule, okay. Well, if they were, I would say that would be kind of a sneaky, tough game too. Because Dylan Raiola, Matt Rule, year 1 to year 2, historically, his college teams, they take a big leap, and so watch out for Nebraska. I know that's. Go ahead.
This is what I was going to end on. They don't play Nebraska, so that's a moot point. But I like Matt Rule. I think they'll be better. Nebraska's been kind of the victim of losing every single close game they've played over the last 8 years. Scott Frost, frequent TFG. Oh, TFG. Damn it, dude. We said we were going to do a TFG this week, and we forgot. Next week, that segment will return. This is what I was going to do, and we'll leave on this as we're over an hour now. So those are the 5 games that make up Michigan's schedule. I just want you guys, real quick, sentence or two. I'm going to list the other 7 opponents. Does any of them, any of the other 7 make you think maybe keep an eye out for that one? Because for me, I'm going to be honest, there really isn't one. Fresno State at home. Arkansas State at home, Minnesota at home, Illinois on the road, Michigan State at home, Indiana on the road, Northwestern at home. Do any of those make you think like maybe be a little careful? Like
the toughest one is probably Illinois on the road. You think about what they did the last time those two teams played. It was 2022 in the Big House, and Illinois kind of pushed them to the brink. That's the game that Blake Corin got hurt. But they don't have like the running back that they had then, Chase Brown. Yeah, he was good, and that offensive line. Brett Bielema, offensive line. A good coach there. That's probably the toughest one. But even then, I don't think. I think if you lose one of those games, that's rough because you've got 5, like as we've mentioned, you got 5 other ones that you really have to play at a above average level to get a win.
Illinois feels the trappiest of them too. It's after your road trip to Washington. It's before your rivalry game against Michigan State. I mean, Michigan State's not going to be very good, but it's still in there. It's in there. I don't know. Illinois. I mean, anybody else, Dan? Is it Illinois?
Think about how Illinois is going to want to win, though. And do you really think teams are going to push us around? I don't know.
That's
fair.
I agree with you. Of all those teams, they're probably the one that pops into my head first. But then I'm just like, not the way they're going to want to play. Yeah, no, they're not pushing us around.
Eric, anybody? I mean, Minnesota at all?
Yeah. So you asked if any of those teams give me concern. I don't need a couple sentences. I'm going to say hell no and leave it at that.
I'm not mad at that. I think it's the 5 games and that's it.
We'll do it, yeah.
I really do. I think the 7 are layups. Maybe Illinois is a contested layup, and then the rest should be pretty solid. And then
I'll end on this note. There was a time when like Michigan State with the whole rivalry thing would give like some concern. 49-0 did a pretty good job of wiping that out. So
and they're, new coach, young quarterback, not a lot of talent, not many guys going to the next level on that roster.
No.
It feels pretty lopsided right now. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, boys. That's an hour and 6 minutes without anything to talk about. I guess that's a pretty good sign that we can fill that airtime. Shout out to Nick Hennigy if he's out there. He's probably sleeping. I don't know.
He's probably sleeping.
Big shout out, big appreciation to Dan. Did the dad thing tonight out at the Diamonds, baseball, softball, all that. Still made time for us. Eric smells like a hockey bag. He's been flying all over the place. He just can't wait for a nice big shower back home.
Read my DJ Rumpf article, please.
DJ Rumpf article, very good stuff, Eric. I mean, he felt like a Pulitzer. Eric's a better writer than me. I've always said that, and that article proves it for sure. So go to Wolverine Digest and check that out. Matthew, the first of many, I hope, was
looking
here.
Forward to it.
And I told you this the other day when we did our recording. Matthew has developed some podcasting chops, folks. This guy used to be a little bit more reserved, a little bit more not anymore. Watch out for Matthew Lounsbury on the mic. Really appreciated you joining us. Everybody who watched us, we're up to 600 people are watching us right now. Unreal, man. Unreal. On the middle of the night at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock now on a Wednesday in May
29th.
Yeah, as we noted. So thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week.